listening to the One Digits Thoughts on podcast. This is Paul Mackey. Recently, I've been teaching myself to use GIMP and DaVinci Resolve as free alternatives for the Adobe suite. Darcy had been using Adobe products a bit in her professional work, so we had a subscription that I was also using. She has since moved on from needing it, and I'm sure you can tell the work that I do in graphics and YouTube versions of the podcast, I don't need to be paying for a full-featured suite of software. I did a GIMP and Resolve version of my previous episode on YouTube, posted a short while ago, and if you're seeing this on YouTube, this video was also produced on Resolve, so please let me know if anything seems out of whack. It's been Homegrown Music Festival here in Duluth again this week. Yesterday was the launch for the week, and while I didn't attend the launch party, I did see friend of the podcast, Luke Moravec, open the night at Carmody's Pub with his one-man band, Zeb or Zeke and the Runaway Screamings, a.k.a. Zazatraz. Later on, I saw the Hypochondriacs and Vina Sera play over at Pizza Luce. It's 8 days of concerts, but as I did not take the week off of work, I am pacing myself and therefore not out on this cold and drizzly Monday night. Well, that's enough of my stuff recently. Let's get back to the 70s for a couple of television shows, starting with The Rockford Files, Season 2, Episode 8, Resurrection in Black and White, originally aired November 7th, 1975. That day of note, this was the opening day of a 3-day event noted as the 8th San Diego Comic-Con. The Comic-Con happened as is usual in summer 1975, but they conducted this 3-day follow-up as a supplement. It was probably an experiment as the only example of a supplemental con in the event's history until November 2021, when they decided to do a 3-day con to make up for their cancelled summer event with COVID vaccination and testing protocols in place. And interestingly, this date also marked the release of Tita Harriman, whose kidnapping was mentioned in an earlier Rockford episode on this podcast. At the box office, I'd like to clarify first the lists I've been following for the 70s have been from the trade magazine Variety, and it turns out the reason some titles seem to be bigger than expected is the methodology. This list is created via a sampling of grosses from 20 to 22 major U.S. cities with the idea this would constitute a valid sample size for the country as a whole. I won't criticize this methodology all these years later. I assume the idea of compiling all the gross data from every theater in the nation at that time was daunting, if not impossible, and the historical record provided is the same information industry professionals were using at the time to make their decisions, so I think it's still a valuable snapshot of the media of the time. All that said, we will look at the period ending November 5th this time. I'll just say, to begin with, that none of the top 5 this time are noted as new release or re-release. Number 5 was Dog Day Afternoon. Number 4, Hard Times. Number 3, Let's Do It Again, starring Sidney Poitier. Number 2, Mahogany. And number 1 was 3 Days of the Condor. At Billboard magazine, for the period ending November 8th, the Hot 100 was topped by number 5, Miracles by Jefferson Starship, number 4, Who Loves You by The Four Seasons, number 3, Calypso, I Am Sorry by John Denver, number 2, Lion Eyes by The Eagles, and number 1 was Island Girl by Elton John. In the UK, number 5 was Hold Back the Night by The Tramps, number 4, Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell, number 3, I Only Have Eyes for You by Art Garfunkel, number 2, Love is the Drug by Roxy Music, and number 1 was Space Oddity by David Bowie. A brief summary of the episode. Susan Alexander is nearly run off the road. She goes to Rockford. It seems she's a journalist researching the penal system, and she met Dave Kruger, convicted of murder, and is working to prove he was innocent. Someone doesn't want her asking questions, clearly. Jim is skeptical. He's been inside and has known lots of allegedly innocent convicts. Dave was convicted over 6 years back of violently bludgeoning his girlfriend beyond recognition. They do eventually track down the woman that Dave had allegedly murdered, and while she dies in the course of their investigation, clearly Dave could no longer be held for murdering her 6 years earlier. It turns out there was a conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and the coroner was in on it. When Susan and Jim figure it out, they go to the coroner, who is trying to escape, with Becker assisting via helicopter. Becker arrests the coroner, Susan gets a news story, Dave gets out of prison, and Jim gets in trouble for being an ex-felon in possession of a firearm.
This is Jim Rockford. At the tone, leave your name and message. I'll get back to you.
Hey, Jimmy, it's Cut and Lou. Gonna be in town a couple of days. Know you won't mind putting us up. It's just me and Aunt Sissy and BJ and the kids and little Freddie and...
Who is? I was surprised to see where I think I recognized John Lawler, who played Dave Kruger, from. He looked so familiar, but when I went down his IMDb, the only clear episode was every episode of the first season of Facts of Life. He was the headmaster. I have no idea the last time I saw the show, but it's the only thing that makes any sense. So, after giving proper respect last time to Stephanie Powers, it seems only appropriate to turn this week's one-off guest star with big things in her future, Joan Van Ark. Back in the first days of the podcast, as featured in the Rockford Digest in this feed, I very briefly mentioned her in an episode, Find Me If You Can, Season 1, Episode 8. She has returned, and this time her name was spelled properly with a K. Joan Van Ark was born in 1943 in New York City. Her father worked in public relations in New York, then later in Denver. Joan grew up from age 9 in nearby Boulder, Colorado. As a student reporter, her father arranged her an interview with Julie Harris, who later put in a good word with the head of the Yale School of Drama. Joan became only the second woman admitted into Yale drama after Harris herself. Julie Harris would play her mother years later on Knots Landing. Joan Van Ark began her professional acting career in Minneapolis at the Guthrie Theater, first in Moliere's The Miser, opposite Hume Cronyn, then in Death of a Salesman, opposite Hume Cronyn and Jessica Tandy. She was under contract for TV and film roles through the 70s with Universal, leading to 3 consecutive seasons of guest roles on The Rockford Files, along with a starring role opposite Bette Davis in a 2-hour pilot film that was not picked up, and a couple single-season sitcoms. In 1978, she starred as Valine Ewing on Dallas, initially for a one-off appearance, but they kept writing her in after that, and she moved on to Knots Landing when that show spun off. This role is what Joan Van Ark is primarily known for. Since that ended, she has worked in various roles, including extensive work on the stage. It looks like her most recent work has been voice performances for kids' shows and video games. I think this is probably a much more complete bio than I was doing during the early days of this podcast, so hopefully that covers it. But if not, she does have one more appearance coming up in Season 3 of The Rockford Files. Artifactoids. At the police station, Jim calls Susan Fearless Fosdick, which sounded awfully specific but not all that familiar to me. The character of Fearless Fosdick was a direct parody of Dick Tracy, written as a strip within a strip in Al Cap's Little Abner comic strip. I was surprised to discover the Little Abner strip had continued publishing all the way until November 13th, 1977, with Fearless Fosdick's final appearance being November 12th, 1977. So while the character of Fosdick had been around since 1942, he was still a contemporary reference during this episode. Fearless Fosdick was apparently indestructible, often depicted as being full of smoking bullet holes. He was painted on the nose of more than a few planes during World War II. The character had both bad aim and bad judgment and was trigger-happy. Chester Gould, creator of Dick Tracy, was not happy with the character, but Cap apparently always spoke of Gould and the Dick Tracy strip with reverence, so it seems the parody was created out of love instead of malice. There was eventually an NBC puppet show version of Fosdick, and Fosdick was licensed to the makers of Wild Root Cream Oil, a hair tonic. A motion picture adaptation was begun in the 1990s, but never made it to production. So what worked in this episode? I thought Joan Van Ark and James Garner worked well together. She was a good target for his exasperation. The progress of the investigation made perfect sense. I also appreciated Jim's attitude about just how innocent everyone inside the walls claims to be. What didn't work? Between the number of conspirators involved, the numbers just don't seem to work out to the point of murder. I did do the inflation conversion, and the $200,000 in 1975 dollars equates to close to $1.2 million today, but between Cheryl, the mother, the cousin, the coroner, plus his henchman, who was actually doing all the wet work for him, it hardly seems to rise to the killing people levels of money. It also felt like the whole plot was resolved verbally, and they tacked on the chase scene just at the end for fun. So next time is The Rockford Files, Season 2, Episode 9, Chicken Little is a Little Chicken, but next up on this podcast is The Magician, Episode 1, The Manhunters, after a couple of vintage advertising spots.
Henry, where are my mushrooms?
Don't stock them anymore.
What?
Stock these now.
Mr. Mushroom.
It's got more flavor, because they're put up in their own natural cooking juices, like the missus puts up her vegetables.
That's so.
There you are. Your mushrooms are packed in plain salt water, like most.
Then these should taste better.
Sarah, they do.
Mr. Mushroom, put up in their own natural cooking juices.
I'm June Lockhart, and I've served a lot of fried chicken to my family, but fried chicken can be a little greasy. That's why I'm so happy with shake and bake. You shake and bake. No frying, so your chicken comes out crispy, but not greasy like fried chicken. You could really taste the difference. Crispy, but not greasy like fried chicken. Shake and bake. It's better than frying.
Okay, so first up there was Mr. Mushroom, a product that doesn't seem to be around anymore, although I suppose there are still mushrooms that are packed in mushroom cooking juices, as they say. And second, we've got June Lockhart picking up some endorsement bucks roughly 6 years after career highlight Lost in Space, and roughly 11 years before One-Idget Thoughts on highlight Whiz Kids Episode 13 Made in the USA. So here we're going to look at The Magician, Episode 1, The Manhunters, originally aired October 23rd, 1973, 6.5 months after the pilot movie, and I was roughly 5 months old. That day of note, there were a couple of news items of note for the day. 19-year-old Chris Everett beat Nancy Ritchie to retain her WTA championship, and Richard Nixon agreed to turn over the White House tapes to Judge John Sirica. At the U.S. box office for the period ending October 24th, 1973, number 5 was new entry The Way We Were, number 4 was MASH in a re-release, number 3 was Hit, starring Billy D. Williams and Richard Pryor, number 2 was Cops and Robbers, and number 1 was a re-release of Paper Moon. At Billboard magazine on the Hot 100 for the period ending October 27th, 1973, number 5 was Keep On Truckin' by Eddie Kendricks. Number 4 was Ramblin' Man by the Allman Brothers Band. Number 3 was Half Breed by Cher. Number 2 was Angie by the Rolling Stones. And number 1 was Midnight Train to Georgia by Gladys Knight and the Pips. And over in the UK, number 5 was Caroline by Status Quo. Number 4, Sorrow by David Bowie. Number 3, My Friend Stan by Slade. Number 2, Eye Level by Simon Park Orchestra. And number 1 was Daydreamer Puppy Song by David Cassidy. Before we get to the summary of the episode, let's look briefly at what it was up against. The Magician led off prime time on Monday night on NBC, and I don't think it's a spoiler to reveal that it did not win its time slot, considering the network did not order a second season. It was against tough competition. Over on ABC, The Rookies was a cop show in the second season of 4, ranking 25 for the year, and CBS, The Venerable Gunsmoke was still going strong, ranking at number 15 for the year. In the end, The Magician ranked number 47 out of the 80 ranked shows. Brief summary of this episode. Someone is out to get Tony's best friend Max Pomeroy. Max's column has likely pissed off the wrong people. Tony chases an assassin at the shipyards and catches the plate number, leading him to Diane Thompson, who is an alcoholic gambler in deep with an undercover casino. The man who operates the casino, Stan Owens, was leaving her apartment, and Tony lifted his wallet to check his identity. Max confirms he is set to testify at a grand jury about that same operation, but he doesn't know who the big boss is. The assassin gains access to Max's room and subdues his son, while Tony uses Diane to gain access to the casino. After cheating the casino out of thousands of dollars for Diane, Tony is too late to prevent Max's shooting, though the rushed shot is not a kill. The assassin then kidnaps Max by hijacking his ambulance, and Tony manages to jump on top of it. In the end, the shipping magnate, who was Max's friend, turns out to be the big boss after Tony rescues Max. Who is Keen Curtis as Max seems appropriate as this episode is so Max-focused. Now, I realize he was in the Whiz Kids episode The Sufi Project, the one with the dolphin, but where I really recognize him from is Cheers. I wasn't the hugest Cheers fan in all the world, but I saw a lot of it, and there were two adversaries, as I recall. Gary from Gary's Old Town Tavern, and John Allen Hill, owner of Melville's, the seafood restaurant on the main floor of the building above Cheers. And Keen Curtis played Mr. Hill. Keen Curtis was born in 1923 in Salt Lake City, Utah. His mother was a teacher, and his father worked with the railroad. Keen attended Kaysville High, just outside Salt Lake City, and enlisted in the U.S. Navy out of high school, serving 3 years in the Pacific during World War II, where he achieved the rank of lieutenant. Following the war, Curtis received a B.A. in theater in the University of Utah and was honored by a Theta Alpha Phi Drama Honor Society as the university's Outstanding Actor of the Year. His film debut was in Orson Welles' 1948 film of Macbeth. His theater career began behind the scenes as an assistant stage manager at the Martha Graham Dance Company, and then he moved on to work in Broadway productions. His performance career began with a role in a revival of You Can't Take It With You in 1965. Keen Curtis won a Tony as Best Featured Performer in a Musical for The Rothschilds in 1971. I think I'm basically required to note connections to the Stratford Festival, and indeed, in 1981 he was a member of the Stratford Festival Acting Company. In the Star Wars radio drama, he played Grand Moff Tarkin. He worked steadily, meanwhile, popping up in small films and as a reliable character actor in television sitcoms, drama, and voice acting, including performing as Balthazar and other voices during the run of the Smurfs animated series on NBC. His final role in a major motion picture was as Dwight Eisenhower in the 1994 movie IQ, and his final television role was a guest role in 2000 on a WB series called 3. Keen Curtis passed away in Utah in 2002 of complications of Alzheimer's disease. Totally 70s. I think I've pointed it out on the Rockford Files in the past, and it comes up here again, the random female guest star of the week kissing the title character at the end of the episode. After the 70s, I think it was gradually disappearing. I know that I pointed it out a few times in Season 1 of Supernatural, so it's obviously not purely 70s. I guess it doesn't fit the totally 70s category after all, and I am just a big fat liar. Artifactoids. I'm looking at filming locations again. I noted that they shot at the Ambassador Hotel in L.A., which only 5 years earlier had been the assassination site of Robert F. Kennedy. Today, though, I'm going to look at the Fort Moore Pioneer Memorial. Now, I know that it's a practicality. They closed Hill Street in L.A. and shot as many scenes as they could for efficiency, but I would love to think they foreshadowed the Memorial Fountain action set piece when they drove past the fountain earlier in the episode. I suppose it could be both. It is the largest bas-relief military memorial in the U.S., and it was dedicated July 3, 1958. As you can partially work out, the memorial is on the site of the former Fort Moore. The image commemorates the raising of the flag over the fort on Los Angeles' first Independence Day in 1847. The fountain waterfall was actually turned off about 4 years after this episode during the drought of 1977 and was not restored to operation until rehab work was completed in September of 2018. What worked? Bill Bixby made a credible action star in this episode, years before he handed off most of the intense action to Lou Ferrigno in The Incredible Hulk. What didn't work? The revelation of the big boss in the last 2 minutes seemed purely based on getting it done for the home audience, who were assumed at that point to be expecting a pat ending. I think it could have been ambiguous and satisfying enough, at least for me. Next time is The Magician, Episode 2, The Vanishing Lady. Happy hunting! You've been listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, produced by Paul Mackey in association with Nimlas Studios. Any short clips of audio from shows is included under fair use for commentary purposes, and copyright for that content remains with its original copyright holders. The theme song is Too Good by Jack Mangan and is used by his generous permission. One Idjit's Thoughts is produced under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You can find more episodes of this podcast and many other fine podcasts at nimlast.org. You can contact me by emailing idjitcastpodcast@gmail.com or commenting on episodes at nimlast.org.